Hi there, welcome back to Clement Makes Stuff. I am Clement, and today we are talking about tonal range. So tonal range in a drawing is the range of light and dark and everything in between. If you imagine pure white, like the white of a paper, to pure black, such as that you would do with really pressing hard on with compressed charcoal. Then all those tones in between from 2 all the way to 9 on a scale of 1 to 10, all those tones in between are evenly spaced out shades of gray. And when we're trying to develop our drawings, especially at the beginning, a good rule of thumb is to have an entire range of tones present somewhere in the drawing. They don't have to all be evenly accounted for. Like you could have a small black or dark area in the center of the drawing, and it can take up only a small amount of the image, and that might be a really good composition. But so it doesn't have to, each tone doesn't have to take up the same amount of space, but it should be present somewhere. And I want to qualify that by saying that not every great painting or photo or drawing has this entire range of tones, but when we're starting out, it's just a good rule to stick to. One example of a drawing that wouldn't fit this kind of model would be a line drawing. It's like a comic book illustration. If it was just line only, there's nothing wrong with that. But when we're talking about shading and trying to do a realistic portrait or a realistic still life, landscape, you want to try to get an entire range of tones, because that's kind of the way the world really looks, and unless it's really overcast or foggy. But an image with a whole range of lights and darks makes it pop. It has visual interest and it's exciting for the eyes. So what we're going to do is make a scale of tonal values on a sheet of paper, heavier paper, so that it doesn't get crinkled too much. And then you want to keep it in your sketchbook. Like make a pocket in your sketchbook so you can keep it in there, even applying fixative, and then when you can take it out and compare it against any drawings you do, and see if you're really hitting that entire range of tones. So in addition to all other things that we've been working on, like anatomy and perspective and shading, well, this is the basic part of shading. We've been working on rendering, like how to model an image to make it look three-dimensional, but having that range of tones, so making that rendering reach all the way to 9 and 10 on our range is going to make your drawing pop. So without further ado, let's get to that demo. Okay, so what I've done here is I've prepped a sheet of paper for making my paper tonal range scale. And this is, I believe, a sheet of Fabriano. It's about 120 pound, so it's fairly thick. And if you look at it from the side, you can kind of get a sense of how thick it is, because I want to use something that's going to be a little bit robust, and because it's going to be moved 100 times in and out of my sketchbook and compared against a bunch of drawings. So I want it to last a while and be fairly sturdy. And the tooth on this paper there's a little bit of texture on it, and that's nice to help me help absorb a fair amount of pigment, especially on the darker end. So I've cut it to 4 inches by 10.5, which is the maximum length that I can fit in one of these sketchbooks. I carry a lot of these sketchbooks that are 8 by 11, I think. Let's double check that. 8 by 11, yeah. And so what I'm going to do is have a pocket built into the back of the sketchbook that this will go into, and I'm also going to spray it with fixative when I'm done so that it doesn't smear. Because if you're going to put the time into making something like this and you want all those gray tones to be accurate, then you don't want it to smear. So you want to take the time to make this look really clean and have a really even range, and then spray it with fixative so it doesn't smear. Okay, so all these, these squares are 1 inch by 1 inch each, and then I've labeled them or numbered them, and then I am going to go another step by masking off the top and bottom so that I don't get any pigment on them, and it just is going to look really as clean as possible. So I've got my masking tape or painter's tape. I have a 4B pencil, not using a Sharpie, my Staedtler click eraser for fine details, my kneadable eraser for softening large areas. I've got Conte compressed charcoal and vine charcoal, which is more brittle and it's good for doing the lighter tones, but it's not so good for doing the darker ones. So you just want to have that range. And I've got my 2H a 2H lead in my architectural lead holder, which is also good for doing lighter tones. And 2 blending stumps. I usually don't use these very much. I'm not a big fan of how they smooth out texture. Usually I like to have a lot of texture in my drawings, and these actually smooth them out. But for this exercise, it's going to be fine because I want each of these boxes to have a really even tone within its boundaries, almost like we're making a paint sample that you get from the hardware store. And each gray tone is going to be self-contained and just really clean right up to the corners. So that's what the blending stumps are good for. All right, so let's say this is going to be white and this is going to be black. So let's number those again on the tape. And this is kind of like a, it's sort of a kind of chill, relaxing exercise that doesn't require a lot of creativity, but you're creating a tool that will help out future drawings. So once I start drawing, I'm going to speed up the video, and there's not that much talking involved. So for you, when you're working on this, feel free to listen to music once you have this set up. And yeah, I'm going to speed up the video because it's not necessary to watch every step in real time. I will tell you that rather than starting from here and making progressively darker shades of gray, one good tip was to make your black first and then make 5 or 6, because if you have a black established and then you have the mid-tone established, I guess there's 2 mid-tones right here because there'd be 3 and 3, then it's easier to kind of work outwards from there, from the mid-tones to white and from the mid-tone to black, as opposed to going from here and trying to get to black. You'd make a bunch of darker grays, and then most likely you get to 8 or 9 and it's still kind of a fairly light mid-tone gray compared to pure black, and then you have to go back and make all of these progressively darker. So it's going to be more efficient to do 10 first and then 5 and 6 and then work outwards. and just try to experiment with different tools to get those to get that range of grays, but keeping in mind that some of these tools like the Vine Charcoal and a regular 2H or HB pencil cannot do pure blacks. Like an HB might be able to get you a 7, so you're gonna have to add charcoal or a 4B to 9B pencil just to get those really dark, rich tones. And I'm going to have an extra piece of paper here to just shield my hand so that I don't smudge it, but also when I'm shading an area, then I'm going to mask off the edges so that I retain those, each box is going to be nice and clean. All right, now we'll start. Okay, I'm going to just pause my sped up video at this point because I did a gray, and this is a good point to just assess, okay, this is going to be white and that's my pure black. Does that tone look like it's halfway in between the two? I'd say no, and in fact it's quite a bit darker than a mid gray. So just use your best judgment. There's not a easy way to measure that unless you go get a paint sample from the hardware store that has a mid-tone gray in it. But I can just easily tell that that's just too dark for a mid-tone. So I'm going to take my kneadable eraser and try to soften it up. And then always clean your kneadable eraser by just working it and pulling it like this. And then all of the pigment just kind of disappears into a black hole within the eraser, or at least it seems to. These things can take a lot of pigment for months and months before they get used up. They're magic. It's looking a little bit better, but I'm going to take a pencil and just even out some of the variations in the middle. Okay, so I've done from 5 to 10, and these two look pretty similar. So I just have to make that one darker or that one slightly lighter. I'm going to try to make that one a little bit darker. So when you have just the 4 or 5, then it's a lot easier to tell which one is off rather than trying to do all 9 from 2 to 9 all at the same time, which is why I thought it would be better to start with 5 and 6 and work this way and then work that way, or the other way around, whatever you like. Just when you're working this side, if this side's already done and you're right-handed like I am, then you just want to make sure that these are really properly covered up so you don't smear all your hard work. But when you get these all even and even gradation, it's just going to look really nice. Okay. That's better. I think I could mess around with it a little bit because the transition from here to here doesn't, it seems more of a bigger jump than from here to there and there, but I'm just going to leave it for now. I don't want to get too fussed about it, and I'm just going to work on this side first. And you'll notice that I was using the blending stump to actually not just smudge and move pigment around, but just to lighten it up, because if you rub this around, it picks up pigment. So it was erasing this tone a little bit, and also using your kneadable eraser just very, very lightly, like cleaning it and then just brushing it will gradually remove layer of tone more gently than if you used a hard white eraser. Okay, so I think that's good enough. It's definitely the kind of thing that you can mess around with. If you're OCD perfectionist like me, you could mess with it indefinitely, but that would be it would be excessive maybe. This is a fairly large, fairly even range, because I know I have pure white and I have pure black, and each one of these steps is each one of these tones is distinguishable from each other. You know, this one seems a little light compared to that one, so here I am breaking my own rules. But I'm going to stop there while I have this taped on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove it from my cutting mat. I'm going to take it outside and spray fix-it on it, and then wait for that to dry and peel the tape off, and it'll be good to use. Okay, so we're back in the studio now, and I sprayed it, and I'm actually smearing a little bit here. I thought I washed my hands, but you just want to, when you're handling clean paper, you want to make sure your hands are really super clean. In retrospect, I could have taped all of that off so that I wouldn't get a little bit of residual charcoal dust and smearing up here, which then I sprayed, and now it is fixed, so you cannot erase that off. So that's okay. I mean, it's not meant to be a work of great art or anything like that. It's a tool to help people evaluate how much range of tone they have in their drawing. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with how it looked. I might just trim that off a little bit, but I don't want to go too narrow because it's going to hurt the structural integrity. But now I'm going to compare that to some of the sketches in my sketchbooks, and then we're just going to see how to use this tool. So here is a demo of a rendering a sphere that's lit from one light source. And this is from an earlier demo, also found in my YouTube channel. And we can assume that anything that's drawn on white paper is going to have the white range, the white tone. But because this was drawn with an HB pencil, HB and 2H, so the darkest spot right here. Let's see if I can zoom this in a little bit. Okay, perfect. So the darkest spot I have is going to be right there. And where does that compare to? I'm going to just grab this. It's probably a 6, maybe a 7 at best, right here. Okay, so 7. So nowhere close to a 10, right? Same with right here is a little bit lighter, and it's comparable to a 6, roughly. Maybe some of the little valleys in between the texture. When we're talking about the tooth of paper, because it's bumpy, so you have peaks and valleys, and sometimes the pigment, depending on how hard you press, you're just going to get it darker on the peaks and not the valleys. So I'm suggesting that some of the peaks here where I was hitting it with the HB pencil might be a 7, but again, nowhere close to a 10. So to make that drawing punchier, you would want to take a dark pencil like this 4B or even a 6, 8B, and then get it even darker, which I'm not going to do right now. Okay, next one. Drawing of my daughter at 1 day old, March 25th, 2008, a fateful day. So again, this is a fairly light toned drawing, and it's a pretty nice drawing. I'm happy with it, but to make it punchier, it could be made darker. So not everywhere, but just, you know, some of the hollows in the ears, parts of the hair could be darker, this background shadow, just little areas. I like how the edge here disappears because there's a highlight hitting the cloth here, so that line doesn't have to continue. Same with here, the edge is delineated less so by a line and more so by where a tone just ends. Same with right there. But to make it punchier, you could increase the contrast in certain key areas. Next one. Here we go. This is a drawing I did inspired by a really nice photo I found on the internet. I just like the pose. I just like the way that she's balanced on this chair. And I wanted to try experimenting with a pencil drawing and charcoal at the same time. The charcoal here, I just very carefully contained it within this shape, and use the blending stump to just even it out, because for this one I just wanted it to look really clean, but it definitely could use more variation in tone, because it just looks a little bit jarring how there's not that much contrast through this whole area down here, and then you just have this big black shape. So I'm just not totally satisfied with it, and I could go in with my architectural lead holder and just make some of those areas darker. Her eyes, a shadow behind where her face and this hair meets, and maybe just in the underarm area, and just even out those tones, because right now we're seeing a 9 throughout here, not a 10, and then you're seeing a little bit of 8 and 7, but then on the rest of her body and the chair, you're not really seeing any of those darker tones. You're seeing at the darkest, I'd say a 6, and then it just kind of cuts off right there. So that's how you would use that tool. I will pull out another example. This is a portrait of Candace Patton, American actress. Anybody who's been watching The Flash on Netflix or CW will recognize her. She plays Iris West. And I just wanted to do this portrait of her, and it came out pretty nice. It doesn't look totally finished to me. I did some stylistic things with her hair, which more illustrative and a little bit less realistic. But because she has darker skin and the way that she's been lit from the side, you have this really nice shadow going across her face like this. It could be darker. This whole area should be all darker. So at least a 4 or a 5 through this whole area, because even though there's some reflected light hitting her jawline, there should not be any pure white anywhere in this whole area. It all needs to go darker. If there's going to be any pure white, then it might be right here, ridge of the nose, side of the chin, maybe a little bit on the neck, because there's not going to be really white anywhere on anybody's skin unless it's a highlight, like a reflection, because our skin is not pure white. So just this whole area could be darker and a lot less white through the hair, except for a few key highlights. So one more thing I will show you. It's a portrait of my friend Malcolm Sutherland, a brilliant artist. And this exercise is done on toned gray paper. If you compare it to the white sketchbook paper, which is not even pure white as I don't know, a computer screen when true white is presented. But this paper is probably comparable to about a 3 on our scale, right? And when you work on toned paper, then it's easier to get that entire range, because you're starting somewhere in the middle, and then you add your shadows, and then you have to work backwards to get your highlights, which is what I've done here with White Conte, because the direction of light is coming from the left side. And so it's hitting his cheek, forehead, bit of his lip, hoodie, and side of his nose. So that's just another way to make sure you get that entire tonal range. And this is definitely not finished. It could certainly, that entire range could be worked on more. Anyway, that's the end of the demo. I hope this is useful to you. What I'm gonna do is add a pocket on the inside of one of these sketchbook pages. So this one would be good. So maybe not this one because it's got nice drawings on it, but what you can do with the last page of a sketchbook is fold it over and then hold it like either like this or glue it to this side, and then you make a pocket, and then you can keep this inside, and then when you're working through your drawings, then you can compare it against the drawing to see if you're getting that entire range. Okay, thank you for watching.